Okay, welcome back to the channel, Hobby-Wan Kenobi. We are in the final stages here, working on the M3 Grant by TAKOM. As you can see here, I'm building up sand and dust effects. I like to go in this sort of a U kind of pattern, trying to avoid putting too much or really anything on the flat surface, but allowing it to build up around the bogies and certainly around any of the bolts. To make this sand effect, I'm using my usual mixture of artist oils. So I used quite a bit of white mixed in with a little bit of burnt sienna to create this sand color. And I'm also using turpenoid as really the carrier for the paint. It's important to get the mixture right. You can see here I'm layering on a bit of just the turpenoid, and then afterwards I will add on more of the pigment and turpenoid mixture. This allows for better flow. Ultimately, I'm trying to get it to be thin enough to be sort of a milky substance, and that allows for just enough pigment to show the color while at the same time allowing it to have enough turpenoid, enough of the thinner, to run around the crevices and around the surface. Don't forget to add the sand on the sprockets and also the back side of the sprockets. And also don't forget to add sand on the underside of the vehicle as well as the back sides of the wheels. Okay, now I'm doing a little pin wash. So I'm adding the sand color to specific points on the vehicle. And I'm trying to target places where, again, the sand and the dust would collect. So right around these bolts and any of these tools and the crevices on the vehicle. I'm using a thin brush that is dedicated for this purpose, and as you can see, I'm applying it to the bolts and sections of the tools, basically anywhere that the sand might catch and stay a while. This is something you might want to do in several stages. It's a good idea also to use a heat gun to speed up the drying process so that you get a better idea as to the final effect of what you're creating. Next, I'm going to apply the wash at the turret. As you can see, I'm applying this effect after much of the weathering has been done, including the chipping and scratching. The idea being that the chips and scratches would happen over time, and I'm applying a layer of sand or dust as if the vehicle is currently in the desert. I'm applying it liberally here, allowing it to sit on the top of the surface, but much of it is collecting around the crevices. You'll also see I'm trying to not necessarily make it even, but allow certain concentrated clumps, while other clumps might be fairly thin, and that just creates interest. I am using a very thin brush that is dedicated just for this purpose. Don't be too afraid to apply this effect. Even if you overdo it, it's fairly easy to remove. And the nature of artist oils is such that it actually could take a day, it could take several days to dry fully. So you can come back to it a little bit later and make any sort of adjustments. So now I'm coming back at it with a brush that has been just slightly tinted with turpenoid. Much of the turpenoid has been removed, and I'm applying it directly onto the dust color. I'm actually focusing on the edge of the dust color These artist oils are of course a liquid, and so when we lay it down it looks as if it is drops of liquid, which it essentially is. And so in order for it to look dry, which was what we want when we're creating dust or sand, I'm going to need to soften the edges, just the edges of the paint, to create that soft, feathery effect. So that's where I'm focusing much of the pressure on. You'll notice I'm not trying to do this quickly. This takes some effort, some concentration, just kind of working it back and forth. I'm not getting impatient. I'm allowing the paint to come up very, very slowly, very gradually. I could add more turpenoid to the brush, but that would put all of the work that I did at risk of being lifted. So I don't want to do that. I just want to take my time, trusting that the paint will lift up. And now the model is completed. Just a couple of notes about the kit. I thought it was fantastic. It went together really nicely. I was worried about the hull, all the different corners and angles, but I had very little trouble getting things to fit. The tracks were difficult for me. I'm going to chalk that up to user error. I somehow have a difficult time with those sort of hybrid tracks where it's a one complete section and then you have many little individual links. Somehow I cannot seem to get the angle right on these things, so I went ahead and got the Mini Art M3 Grant tracks and they worked out perfectly. I will say that those tracks are very tedious to work with. For each track link there are 4 pieces, so 79 track links per side times 2 times 4 for each of the individual track link parts. So it was very tedious, took a long time. That is something that I expect with tracks these days, that they're just going to take a lot of time. I find that the effort is well worth it, and they certainly were in this case. Overall, I'm really happy with how the vehicle turned out. The decals were very simple, straightforward. They look to me as if they're painted on. I'm really happy with how they turned out. They were a little thick, but I spent the extra effort that it took to sand them down and get them down to be at the level of paint, and I think they just look spectacular, so very, very pleased with that. The paints are a combination of Tamiya colors. The black is basically just the NATO black, and it's been, as you can see, heavily faded with the pastels and artist oils. One quick note, I did scratch build the front fenders, the front flaps, if you will, on the vehicle, and they're made out of thin sheet styrene, and give the effect that they're sort of coming off of the vehicle, and that matched a lot of my references, so that turned out pretty well. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe, and the next build is going to be our Gamma Goat from Tamiya. Thanks again for watching. Bye.